The first thing the blizzard killed at Harthwick Abbey was not a monk. It was the bell. For nearly 80 years, that iron bell had told the brothers when to wake, when to pray, when to eat, when to sleep, and when to stop speaking. In a Benedictine house, the bell was more than sound. It was order. It was time made visible. It was the one voice no monk was permitted to ignore. Then, in the last weeks of the winter of 1041, the rope in the bell tower froze so hard that when a young novice pulled it, it did not bend. It cracked. That was the moment the monks understood the storm had entered deeper than the walls. Harthwick Abbey stood on a chalk rise above the northern fens, where winter did not arrive politely. It crawled out of the marshes, hardened the ditches, blackened the reeds, and turned every road into a question. The abbey had been built for silence and obedience, not for siege. Its walls were thick because stone was plentiful. Its windows were narrow because monks did not need much light to copy scripture. By accident, those same walls and windows made it one of the few buildings in the district that could resist a winter trying to erase everything around it. The first warning came from the birds. They left the reeds before dawn, lifting in a dark scatter toward the south. By noon, the marsh ice had begun to split with small dry reports, as if something underneath were knocking to be let out. The wind followed before the snow did. Not a violent wind at first, a steady one, pressing its shoulder against the abbey stones, finding every crack, every shutter, every loose seam in the roof. The brothers kept their hours anyway. They chanted in the chapel, they copied by candlelight. They ate thin broth and coarse bread in silence. But by evening, the sound outside had changed. The wind was no longer passing the abbey, it was surrounding it. Snow arrived on the second day, not as flakes, but as weight. It came thick enough to swallow the outer wall, thick enough to blind the sheep path, thick enough to turn the causeway to the village into a white wound with no edges. The lay cart due from Fenwick never appeared. At first, the abbot called it delay. By nightfall, he called it a danger. By the third morning, he said what every monk already knew. No one was coming. From that hour, Harthwick Abbey stopped being a holy house and became a machine for staying alive. Brother Aelfric, the cellarer, opened the store lists and counted what remained. Sacks of barley, a little rye, dried peas, smoked eel from the fen channels, 2 wheels of hard cheese, several jars of salt, and ale weak enough to be safer than water. The abbot ordered every portion reduced before hunger became obvious. That was his first wise act. In a storm like that, waiting until men are desperate is not mercy, it is failure. The refectory became the living chamber because it held heat longer than the dormitory. The tables were pushed aside. The benches were dragged near the central brazier. Wood was counted by armfuls, then by sticks. The fire was never allowed to die, but it was never allowed to grow either. A large flame was comfort. A small flame was strategy. The storm built a second abbey around the first. Its walls were snow. Its roof was cloud. Its rule was cold. By the fourth day, the windows were sealed from the outside by packed drifts. Daylight reached the rooms as a dull gray pressure, not as light. The brothers began to lose the hours. Without the bell, matins slid into lauds, lauds into prime, and prime into whatever came next. The names remained, but time no longer obeyed them. Food became mathematics. Barley was boiled into pottage, so thin it seemed ashamed of itself. Dried peas were crushed and stirred through water to give the illusion of thickness. The smoked eel was cut into strips so narrow that flavor arrived before the meat did. Hardened rye was softened in broth until it could be swallowed without breaking teeth. No rank protected a man from the portion bowl. The abbot received what the youngest novice received. The old received what the strong received. Hunger, more than humility, made them equal. Water was worse. The inner well had not frozen solid, but every bucket came up rimmed with ice. The rope stiffened after each pull. The men assigned to it worked in pairs, one to break the crust, one to haul fast before the line hardened. Cloth wrapped around their hands did little skin split. Blood touched the wood and disappeared into frost almost instantly. Still, the buckets came up. That became the abbey's new prayer. Not the words in the chapel, not the Latin sung under weak candles. The bucket rising through black cold water, again and again, was the prayer that kept them alive. On the 7th night, The storm struck the storage wing. The roof did not collapse all at once. First came a groan deep in the timber, then a sharp crack, then the sound of snow sliding where no snow should be sliding. The brothers ran with lamps shielded in their sleeves and found one side of the outer store bowed inward under the weight pressing down from above. The storm was no longer only outside. It was changing the shape of the abbey. They worked without shouting. Shouting wasted breath and frightened the novices. Benches were turned into braces. Table planks were wedged under beams. 2 monks crawled through a narrow opening to drag the remaining barley sacks away from the damp wall. 1 sack split. Grain spilled over the floor like pale sand. No one left it there. They gathered every kernel by candlelight. That night, the abbot made his second wise act. He ordered sleep by rotation. The strongest men slept on the outer edge of the brazier circle first. The weakest slept closest to the heat. After an hour, they changed places. No man was allowed to be ashamed of moving inward. No man was allowed to pretend he was warmer than he was pride. In that room could kill as quickly as frost. The bell rope remained frozen above them. Sometimes the younger brothers looked toward the tower as if the bell might rescue time by itself. But the tower gave nothing back. Its silence became heavier than the wind. A bell that cannot ring does not merely fail to make sound. It tells everyone that the old order has stopped working, and that was the hidden danger of the storm. It did not ask the monks to be brave once. It asked them to be disciplined every hour, when nothing changed, when no rescue came, when no dramatic choice appeared. When survival was only a series of small refusals. Refuse the larger bowl, refuse the second stick of wood, refuse to sleep too long beside the fire, refuse to let the well rope freeze, refuse to believe the storm is almost over just because you need it to be. By the second week, fear had worn itself out. The brothers no longer woke hoping for clear weather. They woke because the rota said it was their turn to haul water, stir the pot, check the braces, scrape frost from the inner door, or warm the hands of the man beside them. The storm had taken the sky from them, but it had not taken sequence. Sequence became their shelter. The abbey survived because it became smaller than the storm, not stronger, smaller. It stopped pretending it could master winter and instead preserved one room, one fire, one pot, one rope, one mouthful at a time. Faith mattered, but faith alone did not lift the buckets. Stone mattered, but stone alone did not divide the barley. Prayer mattered, but prayer alone did not decide who slept nearest the brazier and who took the cold edge next. What saved them was order under pressure. Then, on a morning no one trusted, the wind changed. It did not stop. It loosened. The scream around the walls thinned into a long, tired moan. Snow still fell, but no longer with the same hunger. A pale seam of light appeared above the chapel window, so faint that several monks stared at it before admitting it was real. The abbot did not throw open the doors. That was his third wise act. He ordered the men to dig from inside first. The main door would not move at all. Snow had packed against it higher than the lintel. They opened a narrow service passage and carved outward with shovels, boards, bowls, and finally bare hands wrapped in spare cloth. The tunnel was low enough that the men had to crawl through it. When the first brother reached open air, he did not cheer. He went silent. Outside Harthwick Abbey, the world had been rewritten. The causeway was gone. The reed beds were gone. The sheep pens were only soft white mounds. Trees showed nothing but their highest black fingers above the snow. The village road had vanished so completely that no man could say where it had been. The land no longer looked damaged. Damage leaves evidence. This looked erased. The monks stood at the mouth of the tunnel and understood the final cruelty of the storm. They had survived the inside of it. Now they had to survive the world it left behind. Only then did Brother Aelfric climb the tower, with a small pan of coals, and warm the bell rope by hand. It took longer than anyone expected. The fibers smoked. Ice sweated down the braid. At last the rope softened enough to move. The bell rang once. Not clearly, not triumphantly. It gave a dull, wounded note that fell over the snow and disappeared into it. But it rang, and that was enough. Years later, the winter at Harthwick would not be remembered because the monks defeated the storm. They did not defeat it. No wall defeated it. No prayer drove it away. No heroic act broke its power. They endured it by refusing to let disorder enter the last warm room. A frozen rope, a counted stick of wood, a split hand on a well bucket, a spoon of barley pottage, a strip of smoked eel, a place beside the brazier surrendered and reclaimed hour by hour. These were not small things inside that storm. They were the boundary, between collapse and continuity, between a monastery becoming another buried shape in the snow, and a bell cracked by cold, still finding one last sound inside the white silence.